Welcome to my final project for EDRL 610, Word Study, Phonics, Spelling, and Vocabulary Instruction. I've chosen to title my presentation, Beyond Phonics, How Morphology Makes English Spelling Make Sense. Remember, phonics cracks the codes, morphology reveals meaning, and spelling preserves those meaning relationships visually. This is the background to my presentation. The audience I've chosen is Nevada literacy strategists. Our focus for today is word study with a deep dive into morphology and structured word inquiry. The context is my employment at the Nevada Department of Education and the professional development that we provide. The purpose is to bridge research and classroom practice. I chose morphology and structured word inquiry because they sit at the intersection of phonics, spelling, vocabulary, and comprehension. When students understand words as meaningful systems, they can unlock thousands of related words rather than memorize isolated ones. What if one root could unlock hundreds of words? Students often see these as unrelated words. Morphology helps them see the systems underneath. Our objectives today are that we will reframe word study as integrated instruction, understand that spelling is tied to meaning, explore research-based principles, examine morphology through structured word inquiry, and leave with practical classroom applications. Here's our roadmap. Today we will expand our understanding of what word study is, phonics, spelling, vocabulary, and morphology. We will do a deep dive into morphology and learn about structured word inquiry. You will leave with practical applications and resources you can use in your classroom. Word study is much bigger than memorizing spelling words for a Friday test. It's an inquiry into how language works through sound, pattern, and meaning. When students study words generatively, they begin noticing relationships between words and applying that knowledge to unfamiliar words. At the same time, word study is not isolated drill work or disconnected worksheet practice. No more rainbow writing or pyramid writing. Students need opportunities to analyze, discuss, manipulate, and apply words in authentic reading and writing contexts. Bear and colleagues emphasize that students learn best when instruction helps them recognize patterns and connections across words, rather than treating every word as something separate to memorize. Phonics instruction remains essential because students need a strong understanding of how sounds map onto print, how our phonemes, what we hear, map onto the graphemes, what is written. Research from Castles and colleagues supports explicit and systematic phonics instruction as foundational for early reading development. But phonics alone is not the full picture. Students also need connected text practice so they can transfer those skills into real reading situations. Orthographic mapping helps explain how repeated exposure to sound-symbol relationships allows words to become stored automatically for efficient and automatic reading. One shift in my thinking has been understanding that spelling is not just a writing skill, it is evidence of orthographic understanding. When students spell, they are coordinating phonology, orthography, and meaning simultaneously. Developmental spelling research from Bear and colleagues shows that students move through predictable stages as they learn patterns in English. That means errors are actually informative. Instead of simply marking words wrong, we can analyze student spelling to better understand what patterns they are ready to learn next. Morphology is the study of meaningful word parts. Morphemes are the smallest units of words that have meaning. This includes roots, prefixes, and suffixes. What makes morphology especially powerful is that it is generative. Instead of teaching one word at a time, students learn systems that unlock many related words. For example, once students understand the root struct, meaning to build, they can begin making connections across words like construct, structure, destruction, and instructor. This supports vocabulary, decoding, spelling, and comprehension simultaneously. Vocabulary instruction is most effective when students develop deep word knowledge rather than memorizing definitions. Townsend's work emphasizes that students need repeated exposure to words in multiple contexts. Many academic vocabulary words are morphologically complex, which means morphology instruction becomes a bridge into vocabulary development. Students also need opportunities to discuss words, analyze multiple meanings, and build word consciousness so they begin noticing language independently. Effective word study integrates alphabet knowledge, spelling patterns, and meaning. Too often, instruction separates these components into isolated blocks. Phonics over here, vocabulary over there, but language doesn't actually work that way. Skilled readers coordinate all of these systems simultaneously. Morphology helps to bridge those systems because it connects spelling, pronunciation, and meaning together. This next part of the presentation is what I would present to Nevada literacy educators. I will mention turning and talking to your table using whiteboards, practice lessons where they will turn and one gets to be the teacher, the other gets to be the student. However, in the interest of time, I won't give actual time for them to work together. We want this PowerPoint to end in a reasonable amount of time. At least I want it to end in a reasonable amount of time. So here begins our deep dive into morphology and structured word inquiry. One reason morphology is so important is because many academic words are morphologically complex. Students encounter these words constantly in science, social studies, and informational text. Research shows morphology supports decoding, spelling, vocabulary growth, and comprehension. For struggling readers and multilingual learners especially, morphology can become a powerful meaning-based support system. What I appreciate across Townsend's Words as Tools, Bauer's Structured Word Inquiry, and Goodwin's Word Detectives is that all three approaches treat words as meaningful systems rather than isolated units to memorize. Traditional spelling instruction often asks students to memorize words. Structured word inquiry asks students to investigate them. This aligns closely with Goodwin, Lipsky, and On's idea of students becoming word detectives who analyze meaningful units within words. Structured word inquiry, or SWI, approaches spelling scientifically. Instead of asking students to memorize words, students investigate how words work through orthography, morphology, and etymology. One thing I especially appreciated about structured word inquiry is that it invites curiosity. Students begin asking questions like, why is there a G in sign? Or why does Hill keep the A in health? Those questions become opportunities for inquiry instead of incidents of frustration. Students become word detectives by noticing patterns, testing hypotheses, generating related words, and discussing meaning shifts. Goodwin and colleagues emphasize that students should actively manipulate and analyze morphemes rather than passively memorize them. This investigation process is exactly what structured word inquiry encourages. So today we're going to take, this is you being the student, okay? And what we would do is take the base or the root, ACT, act. Okay, we've got some prefixes over here. We've got some suffixes over there. All right, and we're going to mix them together. So with your table group, I want you to jot down as many words as you can in the next 90 seconds. Go. Did you get react, reaction, reactor, reacting, enact, inaction, enacting, interact, interaction, interacting? Can you see how this can be generative for our students? Structured word inquiry and word detectives encourages students to look at words and see what spelling is teaching them. Silent letters are meaning markers. What looks silent may preserve meaning. The G in sign is because sign is related to signal. We hear the G in signal. What does a sign signal to us? A stop sign signals that we need to stop. We have an A in heal. Why do we keep that A for health? Why don't we just spell it H-E-L-T-H like it sounds? Because health is related to heal. Why is there a W in to? This is one I always wondered. There's T-O, I'm going to the store. I want to go to, meaning also T-O-O. And please get me 2 gallons of milk, right? T-W-O. Well, the W in 2 is because 2 is related to twin, twice, 20, 12. And we need to preserve that meaning. The TW preserves that meaning. Spelling preserves word families. Letters often mark meaning relationships. English orthography prioritizes meaning, not sound alone. We may have to flex our pronunciation, but we're not going to flex our spelling. That spelling is going to hold the meaning. So I want you to turn and discuss at your table. What do these silent letters do? I told you. Let's see if you processed what I said. Have you ever thought of this before? Have you ever had a student ask you, why do we spell one? O-N-E. Why don't we spell it W-U-N? That's how it sounds, right? One, as in the number 1, is O-N-E because it's related to alone and lonely, right? Which needs that O-N-E with a long O, right? Structured word inquiry reframes these letters as meaning markers because it preserves the relationship to the root, to their etymological family. English spelling prioritizes meaning relationships over consistent pronunciation. Once students realize spelling preserves meaning families, spelling starts to make more sense. When students ask why there's a G in sign or a W in to, if we don't pronounce it, that question should open the door to inquiry. The G is not unnecessary. The W is not unnecessary. It preserves the relationship from sign to signal and signature, from 2 to twin to twice and 20. What we often call silent letters are frequently meaning markers. The same is true for heal and health, where spelling preserves a meaningful family relationship despite sound shifts. This can be a powerful shift for students. Spelling is not something arbitrary to memorize, but a system designed to preserve meaning. Students are not just learning spelling here. They are learning vocabulary relationships. Understanding the spelling connection between sign and signal also strengthens comprehension because students begin recognizing related meaning networks across texts. We're not just teaching them one word. We're not just memorizing the spelling of one word. We are teaching them meaningful family relationships. Instead of saying silent letters, I've started reframing these as meaning markers, etymological markers, or family markers. Students will love learning about word families and the roots and the history of families. At least I love learning about word families and where our words came from. and why some of our words have that silent GH, like night and flight and right. When I found out that those come from Old English, and originally they pronounced it like that I can't say, right? But we want our students to be curious. We want them to be investigators. We want them to explore the meaning and why these words are spelled that way. Then they're no longer memorizing spelling lists for a spelling test on Friday. They know that Friday and friend are related. That's why friend is spelled with F-R-I-E-N-D instead of just F-R-E-N-D. So Fridays are for friends, just so you know. When our students realize spelling is not arbitrary, that it tells stories, words carry traces of where they came from and how they are related and why they look the way they do. The B in doubt points to Latin ancestry, and doubt might have a double meaning, right? The word muscle comes from the word meaning little mouse. Oh, you can't see my muscle in this. Anyway, if I had a muscle, I would show you that the word comes from Latin meaning little mouse, because if you have really nice biceps, it looks like a mouse is climbing around under there. These are not random spellings. They are historical records. When students see spelling this way, curiosity replaces frustration. I'm going to say that again. I want you to think about it. Curiosity replaces frustration. What are some ideas you might have that you could share with your students? Share with your table partner or with your group. I want you to take a minute, share what you think. How can we replace frustration with curiosity? How can we reframe our own thinking so that we're not saying, English is weird, you just need to know. Makes my skin crawl when teachers say that. So please don't say that, okay? English is not weird. It's morphophonological. Spelling is tied to meaning. At the center of Townsend's Words as Tools framework is the idea of deep and flexible word knowledge. Students need repeated opportunities to speak, write, and reason with academic words in meaningful contexts. What meaning remains stable across all of these words? Okay, this goes back to our hook at the beginning. What if one root could unlock hundreds of words? So we have our struct, struct, which comes from the Latin root struct, from struere, meaning to build, to form, or to put together. Okay. What meaning remains stable across all of these words? Turn in, talk to your neighbor, take a minute, discuss. When we know the meaning of the root and the meaning of the prefixes and how the suffixes can change the part of speech, it's powerful because it demonstrates generative vocabulary transfer, morphology-supported comprehension. So, generative vocabulary transfer and morphology-supporting comprehension. What questions might our students ask here? Can we give it more than one prefix? We have construction. Can we have reconstruction? Matrices are one of my favorite instructional tools because they help students visually organize meaning relationships across words. Students can manipulate these prefixes, suffixes, and bases to generate many related words while discussing how meaning changes. This supports vocabulary development, spelling, and word analysis simultaneously. And we saw a little bit of that with our STRUCT, our struct word matrices, right? This mirrors the semantic grids and generative vocabulary routines used in words as tools. One aspect of this is that Dr. Townsend points out is the importance of spelling the morphemes. Pronunciation can shift depending on how words are combined. However, spelling will remain stable. Spelling will remain stable. And students understand they may need to flex their pronunciation to fit the word form. One of the things I learned was the multi-meaning words, or the polysemous words. And it was interesting because I came across this in multiple classes and through some professional development I was doing with work. So that polysemous word, where words have more than one meaning, and generating and discussing, like, it's so important for our students to discuss, to make sense of what they're reading, to make sense of what they're hearing, and working through their thinking. When students have these rich discussions, they're not just talking about a word, but they're correcting any misunderstandings. It gives you a chance to hear what they're thinking, because we can't see inside their brains, but we can hear what they're thinking, and we can hear their discussions. And we can see how they need more support, what we can do to scaffold. But we want students to read, discuss, write, and investigate these words. Morphology and authentic texts. Morphology instruction should not stay isolated. Students need opportunities to apply morphology in authentic texts and their content area learning. This connects strongly to the words as tools intervention, where students learn meaningful word parts through science inquiries and discussion. Morphology becomes a tool for understanding academic language rather than an isolated skill. I loved the connected texts and the fact that they were interacting with these words over multiple days, over multiple texts, and gaining a richer understanding of those academic terms. One thing that stood out to me with words as tools was the idea that students develop deeper vocabulary knowledge when they repeatedly use words across speaking, reading, and writing contexts. I like that she said, read, 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 discuss, discuss, discuss. This is important. When it's repeated, we know it's important. Morphology gives students tools for making sense of those complex academic words. I loved how Dr. Townsend's words as tools tied to authentic academic text. I love that structured word inquiry lessons encourage our students to notice word families, to investigate spelling, to build matrices, and apply it to their reading and their writing. This is a powerful tool, and it can especially help our struggling readers. Dr. Bowers uses structured word inquiry for students with dyslexia. And because they're looking at units of meaning, it helps them hold that word, helps them recall that word, orthographically map and recall, which is very, very powerful. Townsend emphasizes leveraging all languages as assets. Morphology instruction supports multilingual learners because many Greek and Latin roots transfer across languages. We want to encourage our students to look at the cognates, to look for cross-linguistic transfer, and understand that meaning supports language development. I have my own version of a Freyer model that I use with my students, and one of the first things they do is in the center, they put the word, and they put the word in their home language. And this can be really powerful. Here we have transport and transporter, biology and biologia. Don't pay attention to my Spanish because it's really bad. However, the cognates are similar. The meaning is similar. There's some false cognates out there that you have to keep your eye out for. But overall, knowing that Greek and Latin roots transfer across languages will benefit our multilingual learners and help them access their understanding in both languages. Here's some classroom applications, and I want you to think about different things that you can do with your students. Okay, Dr. Tim Rosinski recommends having a root of the week and creating a vocabulary wall in your room. So you just take, a big sheet of that construction paper that's in the office, that pull off the rolls, write your root of the week on there. So maybe your root of the week is going to be STRUCT, right? Struct, that's what we've been working with. And Joey wants to write construct, right? So Joey's going to write construct. He's going to sign his name. Joey owns that word, right? And Molly's going to say, I can do you one better, construction. So Molly writes construction. She signs that. She owns that word, right? Students are going to be looking all week for ways to take that root, STRUCT, and add prefixes, suffixes, making meaning from that. Maybe they'll deconstruct something, or they'll have instruction on something, but they're going to own that root. They're going to know that root, and it becomes just something simple, right? Something simple. However, students will gain ownership of those words. Word matrices, and if we had more time, I'd have you practice word matrices where one of you gets to be the teacher, the other one gets to be the student. And it's really simple. All you need is a whiteboard marker. You're going to write the word in the root base in the middle, your prefixes, your suffixes, and you may be continually adding to that as you think of new things that will go with that word. Sometimes you'll have to add in the O especially when you're doing things around science, when you have that ology. You know that bio is life, biology, right? BIO is life, and biology is the study of life. So anytime we have that ology, the O is added in there. Word sums, RE plus ACT plus ION reaction. So we're adding our words together, creating morpheme sorts, and having students generate with their own word inquiry notebooks. We want our students to be word detectives. This article resonated so much with me, and I love the idea of using these units of meaning to support literacy. In my own work with my English language student that I was tutoring this semester, I often found her leaving off the final morpheme, such as the S, which makes it plural, the ED, the ING, for those past tense verbs or active action verbs, and pointing out to her that those are units of meaning really helped her attend to those letters and those sounds in words and the meaning that those letters and sounds are tied to. If there's one big takeaway from this presentation, it's that morphology helps students see English spelling as meaningful and connected rather than random. When students understand word families, meaning relationships, and the logic behind spelling, they become more independent readers, writers, and thinkers. Morphology truly sits at the intersection of phonics, spelling, vocabulary, and comprehension. I want you to take a minute and look back at your personal goal. Did you meet it? Is there anything I can do to help you meet it? Is there something you would like that you can take back to your classroom? How can I support you? I am great at creating Google slide forms that you can use so you can create your own little structured word inquiry matrices. Here are just a few resources that you may want to look into. Words Their Way. I love Words Their Way. UFly has many resources for morphology. Structured word inquiry, words as tools, learning about spelling and word connections. Also, you may want to look at etymology or Edym Online to look at where our word families came from. So some questions I still have, and maybe you still have. How early should structured word inquiry begin? Well, we may not want to be starting at the first week in kindergarten. But as students learn to map those phonemes to the graphemes, right? The sounds to the letters they go with, they can start to understand, even because their oral language is so much stronger than their ability to read. We can start building and helping them understand that re, means to do again. They know what play means. What does it mean to replay? What does it mean to reread? What does it mean to rewind? They don't have to do that anymore because we don't have cassette tapes. But if they know re means to do again, they have access to all of these meanings, right? They know, once they can know un means not, and most of them know this already, they can start putting that with unkind, unfriendly. They know what kind is. Do they know what unkind is? Absolutely. We can start this in the very earliest grades. How can we scale morphology in Tier 1? We can point out opportunities for these morphologically complex words. We can give students access to more complex texts, and we can scaffold their understanding by helping them find the roots, the prefixes, the suffixes, look at the meanings of and parts of speech, and how morphemes can change that. How can morphology better support multilingual learners? We discussed a little bit about how they can look for Greek and Latin cognates. But morphology and morphemes, those units of meaning, will help them with both of their languages. This is critical. And here are my references. There were a lot of great resources from this class and from other coursework from my graduate studies. Thank you for watching my presentation.